the relationship that you have with your boss and your peers directly influences how successful you will be in a role.
Today on the Places We'll Go marketing show, we're joined by a standout leader sitting at the intersection of marketing purpose and positive change.
You are only as good as your team. The more senior you get, you need to think about how you build relationships upwards, sideways and downwards.
Clare Sadler, Chief Marketing Officer at the British Heart Foundation and Vice President, soon to be President, of WACL.
WACL stands for Women in Advertising and Communications Leadership. It is a network of the most senior women in the advertising and communications industry. Leadership can be a very lonely place, and that's where your network really, really helps.
And she's worked with iconic brands at both a B2C and a B2B level, including Nicorette, Whiskers, Mars, BT, and Direct Line.
How do you re-engineer the business model from perhaps maybe what it was once to what maybe it is today and what's it going to be in the future?
Quite simply put, Clare Sadler is a leader who makes a lasting difference. Clare, we're so excited to have you on the show. Welcome. So today's episode is of course brought to you by two fantastic organisations. The first, Studio Space, a leading on-demand marketing agency platform. This enables marketers to browse and brief agencies, receive proposals and start work all in one place. It's literally like having your own agency network at your fingertips, without the hassle, as they take care of everything from contracting, invoicing, procurement to legal. So check out Studio Space today. Our other sponsor, of course, is the Marketing Skills Trust, a charity whose mission is to make the marketing industry a better place, providing grants to help create a more equitable industry and help us to level up. The Marketing Skills Trust has been instrumental in championing a more inclusive, diverse and open marketing industry. You can find out more by going to their website. Okay, let's get on with the show.
Claire, fabulous to have you on.
Thanks.
How's it going? What's been going on over the last few weeks?
Oh, busy. End of financial year, start of new financial year.
Looking up?
Looking good, actually. Looking good, the end of financial year. Given the climate, given the external climate, I think.
What, Trump tariffs getting in your way?
Well, I think they're getting in everybody's way, aren't they?
True enough.
It's a bit of a bewildering time. So first off, brilliant to have you on. Obviously, we worked together a little bit in the past, and so let's not do trip down memory lane, but had some good times. But it's a bit of a bewildering time. I'm just sort of, a lot of people sort of confused about what's right and what's wrong anymore. So I don't know, what's your take on it?
What's my take on it? I think it could be quite a difficult time because I think there's a lot of division and a lot of polarisation of opinions. And I think people are sort of a bit miserable about that. I think there's just been a lot of uncertainty. I think post-COVID, it's been just turbulent. I think we had a bit of a bump coming. We were talking about this earlier, weren't we, Richie? A bump coming out of COVID. Everybody sort of like, life is on again, and we all can go out, and everybody was very thankful for that. And then obviously the Ukraine war and the cost of living crisis, and then Trump and his craziness, if you think he's crazy, all of that. And I think, from a marketer's perspective, consumer confidence has been all over the place. Consumer confidence coupled with people feeling uncertain about their financial situation and, trying to sell things or trying to persuade people to donate money, that creates a really difficult environment to do it in.
Yeah, look, I can totally understand that. And interestingly, I was reading a study by WACL that just came out a couple of days ago, and it said the impact of the potential tariffs, because they're changing on a daily basis.
Hourly basis.
Well, exactly. But, it could have real repercussions into the billions for the advertising industry. And so you're sitting at the helm of a marketing function in one of the UK's largest charities. I mean, what's the impact going to be?
We were talking about it actually last week in terms of what we felt the impact was going to be, because we were talking about it from a retail context, because we're one of the largest high street retailers, and in terms of how it might impact us there. And actually, the work that we did, we didn't think it would, at the moment, given where we currently is, would be too bad. From a fundraising perspective, I don't think anybody really knows. I think again it will come down to how is it going to impact people's household disposable income, and at the moment I'm not sure anybody's quite worked that out yet.
Yeah.
Mm. So we've started quite heavy.
We have. I
mean, let's maybe lighten it up a bit. We're gonna do a little bit of your journey and so on, but over the last couple of days, been watching a bit of TV, and I saw the CPR campaign, the head-to-head, and it's like hairs on the back of my neck type moment seeing that. So I don't know if it's not actually that light because it's about people having heart attacks, but it's a very inspirational piece of creativity.
You're talking about the Sky Bet work.
Exactly. So just tell us a bit about that, because I think that's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. So we've been working with Sky Bet now for we'll be just coming up to a year in May. So it's one of those partnerships that is I think really strategic in nature in terms of alignment of objectives and mutual benefit. And all the best partnerships have mutual benefit. They really wanted to do something that would have a really positive impact on society, and obviously we in terms of trying to reach that football audience. In terms of reaching that audience, it was a really important partnership for us to be able to do that, and we set out really ambitious target to train 270,000 people in CPR. We set that out as part of the playoffs. We launched it as part of the playoffs last season. We exceeded that a couple of weeks ago, and they've since sort of upped the target to try and increase that before the next round of playoffs. But yeah, it's been incredibly successful in terms of behaviour change and reaching new audiences and doing it in a way that is, engaging and impactful.
I'd say a marketer's job is never done. Changing goalposts constantly, huh? No matter what it
They're
is.
very ambitious. They're very ambitious for the partnership with us, and I think that's one of the really lovely things about working with them. Both my team and their team are always looking at how can we make that bigger and better, and how can we have more impact and ultimately save more lives, more people that know CPR.
For those who haven't seen it yet, because I don't know how long this particular one's been out. It's a head-to-head of somebody who saved somebody in front of them that they've used CPR to do that, and but also, I mean, some very high-profile young footballers have died or had heart attacks on the field. So I don't know if that was part of the logic, because
I mean, I suppose one of the biggest causes of sudden death in young people is undiagnosed cardiomyopathies, so inherited heart conditions that are just not known about. So often when you see young people collapse on the football field or in sports activities, it will be because of often it's because there's something that's been undiagnosed. And obviously Christian Eriksen a couple of years ago at the Euros was an example of that, and that was another opportunity that we had to, I suppose, take that cultural moment, that quite sudden and quite scary cultural moment, because it happened live, didn't it? And respond to that in a way that helped educate the public to learn CPR.
Yeah, sorry, we went heavy again. It's all light-hearted from now.
Look, I'm gonna lighten the load here, Mark. Right?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, clearly,
but it's a serious topic, and the more the more people that we can get to learn CPR, the better.
Absolutely.
You never know when you might need to use it.
Well, there you go. The good news.
And I would say, even if you've never, learn it. It only takes 15 minutes. We've got a Reviver tool which is available on your smartphone, and all you need is your smartphone and a pillow and 15 minutes, and you can learn how to save a life.
Well, you guys, you heard it here first, right? If anybody wants to do that, then get in touch. I'm sure we can facilitate to make that happen. And
the other thing I would say, while we're on to saving lives, do it. If somebody has a cardiac arrest, technically they are already dead, so you can't hurt them anymore. So give it a go. It must be a terrifying situation to be in, but always try.
So just the last point, my wife's a nurse, and she's given CPR and work training and so on. And exactly that point, people are afraid of like breaking
a rib
ribs.
or
like,
hurting.
Fuck it,
So,
do it.
Yeah.
God.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Back to you, Richie.
Lighten it up a bit.
Exactly. All the health disclaimers now sorted. I think it's quite funny though, right? We often say that, as marketers, it's all fairly lighthearted. We go, we're not saving lives, are we?
We are saving lives.
Isn't that amazing? And so coming back to that thought, I mean, so you've had a plethora of a great career, many different brands, and now you're sort of sitting in this role with the British Heart Foundation. So tell us a little bit more about what got you here and maybe what keeps you.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about this earlier, didn't we, in terms of what got me here. I mean, Mark referred to my time at Direct Line, and Direct Line had been through a lot of changes, has been through a lot of changes, and I decided I was going to leave, and I'd already decided that the time had come for me to go and try for a new opportunity.
You and me both, Claire, don't worry.
But I made that decision before COVID hit. So I found myself an in-betweener in COVID and in lockdown, which wasn't in the plan. Definitely wasn't in the plan. And this role, I suppose it's a bit testament in terms of the importance of your network and how you build a network, invest in your network within the industry, because the role found me. I wouldn't have been on a headhunter's list for this role. I had no charity sector experience previously, other than some fundraising experience through my work with WACL. But a couple of people in my network said to me, "Oh, there's a really interesting, or there's a role that might interest you at the British Heart Foundation. You should just go and have a chat with them, find out a bit more about it." And you leave a role and you think, well, what are my red lines? What do I want from my next role? I knew that I wanted to work on I wanted to work on a well-known brand, but I wanted to work on one that perhaps had lost its way a bit or needed a bit of transformation. I was like, oh, that's interesting, well-known brand, but one that I felt had perhaps lost its way a little bit in recent years. So I went along, I had a chat. The more I had a chat, the more interesting it became in terms of sort of, I suppose, the transformation opportunity on a professional level, and on a personal level, I've lost people. I lost my granddad to heart condition, so it was a bit of a head and a heart choice that I made, and I think they were looking for somebody who had commercial experience. They wanted somebody from out of sector. So that's how I found this role. The role found me.
Good decision. You've said a number of things that I really want to go deeper on. Being an in-betweener, the power of the network, and we must talk about WACL. So I'm going to store those up, because I would like to go even further back, because curious to know, and it's a question we often ask, what got you into marketing in the very first place? It's the obvious question, but it's always an interesting story.
I listened to Les Binet's episode last week, so I thought I'm going to listen to last week's episode, and I didn't know that he'd been a physicist.
Don't tell me you are too.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. But it was interesting in terms of the number of people that sort of find themselves in marketing or fall into marketing. It wasn't their original plan. It wasn't my original plan. I went to university and I studied law. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer.
Ooh.
And I did a 4-year degree. The third year was sort of out in industry. And at the time, going back longer than I care to remember, as a mixed race woman from a working class background, it wasn't a profession that I felt I fitted in very well. That, and then combined with sort of what I was doing as extracurricular stuff at university, which was helping organise and promote house music club nights, and by the end of my degree, I decided that I much preferred organising and promoting club nights than I did studying law. So I moved to the bright lights of London and set about finding myself a marketing job.
Da, da, da.
Yeah.
And did you then go to many club nights thereafter?
Yeah, I spent probably misspent youth, too much time clubbing,
But there you go.
but having a good time with it.
Well, interestingly, and I think that whole thought around perhaps clubbing links nicely into the thought of community, and you're still very active at WACL today.
Yes.
So I too love to pick up on some of those topics that you mentioned there, Mark. And I really am intrigued by the power of networking to begin with. And maybe what's your take on it? How do you do it? Any sort of secret tips that you can give us, and how to be effective, particularly in your role in WACL that plays a part?
I am not somebody who relishes walking into a room full of strangers. So I'm not talking about networking in terms of going around pressing the palms of strangers and introducing yourself. But I suppose what I was, although everybody has to do that at some point in their career and their life, so you get over it and get on with it. But I was talking about just the investment in your network and people that you meet along the way. You two are a good example of that, in terms of you've said you've built a really good, strong friendship with Mark, and look where that's led you.
Yeah, more or less.
Oh, right. Now and again.
But, you meet people along the way through the jobs that you do, the agencies that you work with, the people that they introduce you to. And over time, you make work friends. Friends that, work colleagues that become friends. And the power of your network to, support you, inspire you, teach you, challenge you, pull you up on things when you need to be pulled up on, is... it can't be underestimated. I wouldn't underestimate it. I think it's, incredibly powerful in terms of how it supports you through your career and often through life situations as well.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think friendship is not a bad word to use, because it's true. Sorry to sort of break the magic for anybody aspiring to be a senior leader, but the higher you get, the more lonely it is.
I was thinking about today and, what might come up. And I think you're right. I think leadership can be a very lonely place. And that's where your network really, really helps.
Why is it a lonely place? Come on, everyone aspires to be, get up there into the echelons.
I think often, you might be grappling with problems or challenges or situations that you can't talk to your team. Sometimes you can't talk to your team about them. Sometimes they're, confidential. Sometimes there's situations where people expect you to know the answer and you might not. Depending on the organisation you work in will depend on how vulnerable you can be in terms of saying, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to find out, or I'm going to ask this person. Some organisations are more open to that than others in terms of showing vulnerability in leadership. So, I think that's where your work network really, really helps you out.
I think, Richie, you've been a CEO as well. You are a CEO. You know yourself. It's, sometimes there's a necessary distance, isn't there?
Sometimes, yeah.
But if I think about vulnerability, you said in between it into COVID, it's interesting how language gets normalised. So 10 years ago, people weren't talking about imposter syndrome. Yeah. Now people are on stage talking about imposter syndrome. A couple of years ago, I don't think, other than the TV programme, and I hadn't heard the term in between us. And now it is a very commonly used term. Yeah. And actually, on our travels, we pick up a lot of people, surprising number of people are in between. So you had that experience and navigated through. So this is straightforwardly perhaps some advice for people who are in that situation now. Yes, networking, but how to find the fortitude to get through that in-between phase?
Yeah, I mean, I think a bit of distance to start with. I think there's, depending on how you've left an organisation, and I've left a couple in different ways. Sometimes there's a bit of processing that's needed in terms of how you've left, and giving yourself a bit of time and space to think through that. If you have access to a coach or somebody who can act as a coach, I think that's incredibly helpful in terms of working out what next in terms of direction. What you want for yourself in terms of your career, but also what you want from your life, because the two things are not, they come together. And I think that what's sort of the work that you can do with a coach and, lots of coffees and chats as well, back to the network, can help shape your thinking in terms of what next, what type of role do I want, what would excite me, what would inspire me, what don't I want, and where are those red lines. And I think that's before you even start talking to headhunters, because the first thing the headhunter will say is, what are you looking for? And they'll put you in a box in terms of what sector you've come from. And you need to be very clear when you have those sort of conversations, when you start having those conversations with them about, this is the type of role that I would like or wouldn't like.
Reading between the lines, and I totally agree with the headhunter point. I put you in a box and then they want to kind of put you into a similar role somewhere else and the like. And I think the way that you've navigated through that is almost circumnavigating that formal system and finding roles through that.
I mean, at a senior level, CMO roles, they often come through your network. Or even if there's a headhunter involved, it will be through word of mouth. You might find out about it, or you'll be recommended for it through the headhunters network.
Yeah. On that note, I want to come on to WACL, because clearly you've got a fantastic
For those listeners who don't know who WACL
Well, exactly. We need to kind of elaborate to begin with. And beyond that, you're about to becoming the incoming president.
I am. I'm vice president at the moment. I'm the incoming president in July.
So give us an understanding, perhaps, of WACL, and then, but why more importantly, as to some of the motivations behind why you're there.
Yeah. So WACL stands for Women in Advertising and Communications Leadership. It is a network of the most senior women in the advertising and communications industry. It's over 100 years old. So it was established in 1923, and it was established originally as a dining club because women that worked at that time in the industry, it was a time when women couldn't go out unchaperoned. So it was set up as a dining club, as a appropriate, safe place to be able to entertain and take clients. Thankfully, 100 years on, we've moved on a bit since then. But
you guys don't do dinners?
we do lunch, we do dinner. But the purpose has been far more developed in recent years, and that's very much about accelerating gender equality in our industry. And we do that through our three strategic pillars. The first is about supporting members. So back to the network, and leadership being a lonely place. It's a club of 370 senior leaders. So that's a lot of people to support each other. The second pillar is around inspiring and developing the next generation of talent. So paying it forwards to those women who are starting out on their careers and developing in their early career. And then the third area is around campaigning. So campaigning for change, be that improvement in policies, be that through the work that we do in terms of being flexibly connected and flexible working. And there's a whole strategic playbook about the 5 levers of change, which we campaign for.
Right.
So, yeah.
Fantastic organisation. Just a tiny little funny story. I went to the gala dinner in December.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably, maybe 300 female participants, attendees, and I don't know, maybe 10 or 20 male.
Oh, you've in your element.
Well, so Beverly Knight comes onto the stage and starts checking out some amazing
dance floor.
The dance floor, absolutely crazy. And I'm thinking, whoa, I mean, I'm 2 left feet at the best of times. I'm not going up there. But the unintended positive thing was that nobody's in the silent auction. Everyone's on the dance floor. There's just 20 sad men looking at their mobile phones on the silent auction. And I got, for the minimum bid, I got a round of golf with my son to play, and we did it last week.
Very nice.
So I'm going again if there's a silent auction.
There's always the silent.
There's always brilliant.
And it's always a great Christmas party.
It was a great night.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the world's gone a bit mad. You've got massive global organisations putting their DEI policies in the bin.
Sunsetting them,
which is a polite way of saying selling out, if I was going to be provocative. So never a greater need. I mean, how do you sort of
navigate?
How is your membership thinking about what's going on right now? It's
been a really active conversation, as you can imagine, amongst members, and unsurprisingly, in a club of that size, difference of opinion. Some members feel that we should be far more militant about it in terms of campaigning harder and more vociferously for in terms of those people or those organisations who have stepped back or sunsetted policies. But often those organisations, some of those organisations are ones that members have to work with, be them on their media plans, or agencies including those types of organisations on clients' media plans. So it's definitely not black and white. We've taken a position, and you might have seen the piece that Karen Stacey wrote a couple of weeks ago. We will always respond with fact and evidence, and we have chosen not to, campaign in a militant way, but we firmly, believe that equality is for the benefit of all. It's not just for women; it's for men and non-binary and society in general. Societies that have greater equality. We know the financial stats in terms of businesses performing better, but generally people are happier in terms of their home lives as well. There's plenty of evidence there. So it's about campaigning from a place of fact and evidence, and bringing allies with us, bringing men into the conversation. And sometimes, I've had this conversation with my husband, and sometimes you will have men who are very much allies, but they're sometimes worried about saying the wrong thing. So actually inviting and having open conversations, even if those conversations are difficult, is a good thing. And Jan Gooding actually wrote a brilliant piece in. She writes a column in Media Leader, doesn't she? And she wrote a piece last week about listening to your critics, and however hard that might be, listening to different points of view, actually there's value in that, to understand their point of view and be able to, consider that and respond to that and find value in that.
Claire, I'm really genuinely thankful that you brought up the thought about how the allyship is so important, and yet sometimes, as you say in your husband's anecdote, it's difficult to ensure that you can articulate sort of your perspective in the right way without then unintentionally sort of offending.
Yeah.
And that's not the intention in any shape or form. So I'm really glad that you brought that piece up, because I too sometimes at the back of my mind kind of go, I want to do more and I want to say more. I just, I don't know where the lines get drawn and how to make it in a way that actually kind of works. And
so it's about creating a safe space to have that conversation, and that's the adult thing to do,
isn't it?
In terms of having an adult conversation. However, emotional you might feel about it. And yes, it makes me furious that some organisations are sunsetting their EDI policies, as I'm sure it does many other people, but trying to understand why, and actually responding with saying, well, actually, this is why you shouldn't.
So to that extent, and I'm really glad that you brought up the D&I conversation here, because I'm mixed race, and you mentioned that you're as well. And I wonder if you could maybe share your experience, a lived experience perhaps, of how navigating our industry has been, and it's difficult to kind of compare to other people, places, and spaces. But I love your perspective on it.
I suppose I've got both being mixed race and being a woman, and I started my career at BT, which was a very male-dominated environment, going back quite a few years. It was sort of telco, ex-public sector, so it was very white, it was very male. And definitely as I navigated my career and as I got more senior, I felt like an outsider. I remember the first sort of board meeting I went to, or operational review meeting I went to with senior leaders, and just being the only woman in the room to start with, thinking, okay, this is I'm the only woman here, and then the sort of pre-meeting conversation, as everybody's sort of coming in, settling down, was about rugby at the weekend and this and that, and lot of male sport, and I was like, well, I can't partake in that conversation. And I don't think it was ever intentional, but it just makes you feel already on the back foot, because whatever you're going to present in that meeting, your male colleagues have already formed a bond in some respects.
Of course.
So I'm sort of quite mindful of that, I suppose, in terms of how you make people feel at ease in a meeting, and the sort of topics that could be universal topics rather than I suppose gender biased topics. I think it probably wasn't until a few years later that I reflected on that and went, that's why I felt so uncomfortable.
So that question comes from the heart, Rishi. Tell us what comes up when you hear Claire talking, and
It's really emotive, and you're totally hitting on some heartstrings as you speak. So it's incredible. So I mean, I had certainly not as tenured a corporate career as you did, but I think there was an inflection point while living in corporate land where I had two options, and one to conform to the norm, the rugby conversations, which I too, by the way, don't have much. I can't really relate to. Or indeed, at some point, you kind of go, well, if I can't be myself where I am at, I've got the choice to either, play along or indeed try and carve my own way.
Right.
And I think that plays a large part in my career route and options that I did eventually end up going. And so you somehow cracked it. And I don't know if that's what you described.
I don't know if I cracked it, but I suppose I found a way to navigate it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I, on the other hand, kind of just felt that I might not ever be able to do that. And therefore, on the balance of probability, if I was to achieve what I felt I really wanted to, I probably had to go down a different path, which, by the way, I'm really happy I did. But it's
wasted in corporate la.
Well, there you go. There you go.
So before we move off of WACL, I just wanted to ask you straightforwardly, you've obviously worked your way through, because it's an organisation, you work your way up and you become vice president and then you're president. So what's going to be the signature of your presidency?
Oh, I can't tell you that because I haven't announced it to the club. I haven't done the official process is that you pick up the baton as part of the AGM, because we have obviously as a limited company we have to, or a limited not-for-profit company, we have to have an AGM.
Yeah.
So it's
So you're going to leave us on the hook, basically.
Watch this
all
space.
listeners, exactly.
Watch this space.
Hey,
Yeah.
there you go.
Fair enough.
But it will be about continuity. I think the beauty of having a vice presidency and then a president and then a year as ex-president, you get some continuity of leadership, which I think is important.
Okay, we'll wait for that patiently. So working in the third sector, some people might have a perception that it's kind of a bit soft and nice, but actually it's really hard and tough, because every pound counts towards saving lives, changing lives, and so on. And so I think it probably is, your commercial underpinning is pretty important into that. But tell us the role around and data and analytics and sort of the hard edges of marketing, in where people perhaps would be surprised.
Yeah, we've got a sizable customer base. I think, like many organisations, our customer base and our data has grown organically over time and isn't as clean or as easily accessible as you might want it to be. So we are in the middle of a transformation, data, digital, MarTech transformation, which anybody who's ever done one knows is never plain sailing. But even with the data that we do have, over the last few years, we've put a lot of effort into really understanding our customer base better in terms of who they are, what do they look like, But obviously, think about customer lifetime value not just in terms of hard cash or fundraising income, but also in terms of, can they donate things to the shops, be that furniture, be that clothes, can they volunteer their time, because the majority of our stores are staffed by volunteers. They all have some small element of full-time staff, paid staff, but a lot of our volunteer hours go into running the stores. So thinking about how people can give in more ways than just money, and finding where the people within your customer database that are most likely to do that. So it's in many ways a same as any other subscription-based business. Whether you're selling insurance or you're selling broadband or you are engaging people and asking them to give you time, money, or things to sell in your shops.
So we've talked a little bit about, we touched on leadership.
Mm.
We talked a bit about loneliness and
Yes.
so on. I'm wondering what's your signature as a leader, and maybe what shaped you, some pivot moments that shaped you as a leader.
Yeah, I suppose as you progress through your career, you spend a little bit more time reflecting on this, actually, in terms of what have I learned along the way. What have I learned along the way? Your team, you are only as good, it's a bit of a cliche, but you are only as good as your team. But your team is not just your immediate direct team. The more senior you get, you need to think about how you build relationships upwards, sideways and downwards. And, the relationship that you have with your boss and your peers directly influences how successful you will be in a role. So thinking about those relationships and how you develop strong working relationships with your peers as well as with your immediate team, how you develop and grow your immediate team is really important. So the investing the time in building a really strong team and developing them is definitely something that I've learned and put quite a lot of focus on, and my team would say the same in terms of actually how we work together as a team. In terms of what works well, what doesn't work so well. Are we comfortable challenging?
So I'm going to fly a little kite here. I do some of this in coaching, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes it's helpful to think about your impact in a metaphorical way. So I've talked to people like, I'm a lighthouse, I'm a spark, I'm a rainbow, I'm a pirate, I'm a commando. And then that helps them to show up how they show up across actually not just work, but all aspects of their life.
Okay.
So I'm kind of putting you on the spot a bit here, but I'm going to talk a little bit longer just to give you a little bit more thinking time. But is there a metaphor that comes to mind about, how people would describe you or how you like to see yourself in a leadership capacity?
That's really... I would like to say sunshine.
Nice.
I'm generally a pretty positive, optimistic person, and I'm, I like to solve problems and sort of bring that positivity to solving problems and that sort of continuous improvement of what could we do better or bigger, and this sort of I like to think that I would spread a bit of sunshine and inspiration around the place.
Love it.
That's so nice.
And I'm happier in the sunshine as well. I'm definitely a happier person in the sunshine.
And by the way, you got such a great positive disposition. In any case, it's what a great metaphor to actually. Very nice.
That.
There you go. We like to ask unique questions here on the show. So hey, you got it.
We'll bank that one.
Yep, indeed. Claire,
I'm not saying I always get it right and I'm always sunshine, but I would like to be.
I want to come back, if I may, a bit on the conversation around WACL just once again, because you talked about one of your core pillars being next generations and helping
talent.
Young women, embrace their careers and work their way through the industry. And perhaps maybe this is an opportunity. I would love to hear a little bit more about some of the challenges that they face, and perhaps some of them the ... into how do you help to kind of champion them in their careers.
Yes. We did a piece of research actually as part of the start of my vice presidency. I did a piece of research because I was interested in seeing what barriers, because we were thinking about how do we develop our talent activities through WACL over the next few years.
Yeah.
And, let's do some customer research, make sure that we are tapping into the things that women, young women need. And we did a survey. It was nearly 200 people, and we did WACLers, so those women who got to a certain point in their career or leadership position, and then we did sort of younger generation. Interestingly, because WACLers, it was positioned in terms of what would you have liked to have had earlier in your career, and obviously younger people was what do you want now. There wasn't a huge disparity. There was some disparity, but not huge disparity. And the things that came up were self-confidence, which always comes up, balancing work and home life, particularly around, when to have a family, how do you juggle having a family. There was some sort of, I suppose, more core leadership skills around sort of financial understanding, financial acumen. Networking was in there. How do I network effectively? So there wasn't a massive difference, and actually we did it, a piece of research a few years ago as well, and it hadn't changed that much in terms of there's still the things that women would like support or help with.
But it grinds me to think that there's still barriers that exist today.
Yeah, I mean, whether there are barriers or whether there's perceived. If you look at the stats, Pregnant and Screwed in their latest campaign about the number of women that get made redundant during maternity leave, and it's heartbreaking, and you're just like, I thought we would be on this, but clearly we're not. So helping women navigate that, whether that's through having braver conversations at work. Whether it's about knowing their legal rights better, whether it's about thinking about the types of roles that you might want to do, or some career planning in terms of, if it's not now, when is it? Because sometimes timing plays a factor in terms of when's the right time to go for your next role. So yeah, it is disappointing, and that's, I suppose, why WACL still exists and needs to exist, and other organisations like it. And hopefully through the work that we do, through the mentoring scheme that we run, so WACLers, give up their time freely to mentor younger women, we can impart a little bit of advice and wisdom that we've acquired along the way, and support them. And
just the last point, if somebody's interested in joining WACL, is that something that they can do, or how does that sort of work?
How does that work? It's by an application process, and there's some criteria for that in terms of the seniority of your role, the impact and influence that you can have or have had in terms of supporting the purpose of accelerating gender equality. So yeah, but details are on the WACL website.
Yeah. Perfect.
One take on this conversation is that the job, we've got a long way to go, because it's overcoming 10,000 years of embedded bias. And we were in Dubai, I remember, a couple of years ago, and it was the first time I was with somebody who had experienced overt racism. Yourself. And so it's not a moment of time to solve this. I'm gonna just link back to the house music thing though. which is
From where to where?
Join these dots. No, but the point is, there must be there's maybe a little bit of a creative streak in you, and so I want to talk a little bit about the creative process. So when we interviewed Les, he is a physicist, and he was talking very much about some
psychology and economics.
Exactly. What's maybe what's the magic that you've experienced around the creative process? What really makes it magical?
What makes it magical? You all have been here, is when you see an idea, and you're like, that could be brilliant, and you're like, I can see that. But I mean, there's a lot that gets you to that point in terms of, I'm a great believer in you put a rubbish brief in, you get rubbish work out. So the amount of work, or the amount of effort and time that should go into the brief and the briefing process is what gets you great work. Great work doesn't just happen. However great, your agency partners are, they need clients to help steer and guide them, and give them some clear objectives and some clear guardrails to work within. So yeah, I would definitely put a lot of effort into that process to get you to great work. But when you get a great idea and you just know, I suppose, and maybe that's experience of having seen lots of ideas, and I think the other thing is, not being scared to go, no, we've got to go again, and we've done that. And that's never easy for anyone. Not easy for the client saying to your agency, I think you need to go again, and not easy for the agency to hear it, but it gets you better work. And actually, the England the Till I Died campaign, that was born out of going again. So and it launched with England Till I Died and the murals during the Euros last year, and we'd gone again on that.
I've got little hairs on the back of my neck when you talk about that, and it links to the thing we said about bravery. You know, to stand alone and be the one who's I don't know if the expression is the one who does a poo in a jacuzzi, but basically the one who is brave enough to stand and say no, it's not good enough. But you know, all credit to you in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I won't take all credit for that. So I had my director of brand and acquisition. He was alongside me in that.
It's such an iconic campaign, and I remember it so acutely now that you said it. It was, you know, it's one of those, probably one of those big moments in as you launched away. But one of the things that I think struck me about the campaign was beyond the murals on some side of the walls was the earned media that then came on the back of that. And I wonder if was that part of the plan? What was planned versus unplanned?
No, it was all planned. And I touched on it earlier. You know, integration is really, really important. It's a non-negotiable. So we talked about the creative process. Integration in that creative process is non-negotiable in my team here at the VHF. And some of that is because, you know, we don't have the biggest budgets. And when you don't have the biggest budgets, you have to make everything that you do work really hard. And we plan everything and think about everything through the lenses of paid, owned and earned.
Claire, through all your experience, what have you learned about the way to approach creative development?
Always start with customer insight. It's obvious. It's an obvious one, but I think that can uncover some really valuable truths about your brand or about how customers or those who engage with your brand see you. And that's definitely where we started at the BHF when I set about rebooting what is sort of a 60-year-old heritage brand. We have 60 years of amazing life-saving research, but when you sort of ask customers what they thought of the brand or what they knew about the brand, a lot of them said, well, it's something to do with hearts. We're fundamentally a research society, a research organisation. And it's a bit sort of stuffy and white lab coats and, a bit cold and austere, which is totally not what the brand is really at all. So that was one thing we uncovered. The other one was, everybody has a heart, right? So everybody should care about the BHF and the role that the BHF plays in people's lives. But the other thing we uncovered in terms of sort of a universal truth is that people don't see heart disease as urgent or important. There are other diseases they think are more important. And they think that heart disease can be managed through lifestyle choices, as opposed to actually heart disease or heart conditions can impact anyone, babies, young people, sports people. So that was the other thing that was a bit of an unlock for us. And that's how we built it from there in terms of actually dispelling that myth that it doesn't affect the young, it doesn't affect seemingly healthy people, and building a platform out from the premise of that universal truth. And actually it's only science that can help outsmart heart disease, and that was the starting point for This Is Science. And that's become the platform for us to take in a lot of different directions. It's been really flexible as a platform, but that universal truth around urgency and importance of the cause, and dispelling the myths about who heart disease affects has been core to all of our creative development. And we've taken it in loads of different ways. And in terms of modernising the brand, and that sort of creative platform around This Is Science, we've obviously had this England Till I Died work. We've experimented with sort of unusual media choices. So the Twitch work that we've done in terms of streams of unconsciousness and interrupting gaming streams. So it's allowed us to both keep the heritage and the credibility that comes, an authority that comes with the heritage of the brand, but also move it to a more modern place.
It's funny. We were just at a conference a couple of hours ago, in fact. And what I found interesting was they talking about how gaming is probably the most used part of the internet today. And therefore, your work with Twitch is just, bang on point in terms of trying to reach that sort of heartland target audience.
And it's an audience that we probably wouldn't ordinarily reach through traditional media channels like TV is still a big channel for us and many other charities. But reaching gamers in the moment where they are and disrupting and interrupting what they're doing. And, that campaign reached 750,000 gamers that we wouldn't ordinarily reach, and it saved a life, which is a very different return on investment.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, you mentioned the word TV in that context. I mean, God, TV's changed so much dramatically in over the last 5-10 years. I mean, how do you still see that playing out in terms of your creative approach and reach to your audience?
Well, TV still is a big part of our media channel mix. We know it still works in terms of driving donations, but when we think about creative development, we think through the line, not just about the TV ad, but how does that work through paid? How does the idea work through paid, owned and earned? So whenever we develop a new TV ad, obviously it's nice to have a 60-second, film that you can play on TV and go, I did that. But also thinking, how does that break down into other assets that can be used through all of the marketing that we do?
Brilliant. Claire, I want to come on to, you've had a fantastic career, and as part of that career, you've stepped into a number of leadership positions. And I wonder if there's any sort of core takeaways or leadership lessons that you could share with us here today.
Yeah. Thinking about this, I think there's probably 3. The first is you're only as good as your team. Or your team and your boss, actually, because it's your team and your boss that allows you to be successful and also will dictate how much fun or enjoyment you have in the job. So when you're thinking about, where you're going to work, who you're going to work for or with, think about that. Think about how you develop and grow your team around you. The best roles that you have, and probably where you do your best work and you have the most fun or enjoyment is where you've got your team's back, they've got yours, and vice versa with your boss. So that's the first one. The second one was try and be generous with your time and your knowledge. We're all really busy people. And we were talking about, saying yes to things. But I've been fortunate, as I'm sure many other senior leaders have been, that they, along the way, along their career journey, they've had people who have been generous with their time or knowledge or experience. It takes longer usually to sit down and coach someone or go through something with someone than it does to tell them what to do. And I've been fortunate enough to have, great leaders that I've learned from. So I try and pay that forward, in the work that I do with WACL, mentoring, the support that I give to the Marketing Academy Foundation and their Be The One boot camp. And with my team, even with my team, we're share and learn sessions and show and tell sessions, just sort of being curious, asking questions and giving feedback in the moment. In the right way, in the appropriate way. The last one was around how you make people feel. There's this sort of a Maya Angelou quote that's like, people will forget what you said, forget what you do, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. And I don't always get it right. My team will tell me this, but I try to think about that when you're in a situation or, working with your team. Is how are they going to leave this meeting feeling? So that's another one. And I've got a fourth one now, which is keep learning and think about, keep open to opportunities. And as you step into different leadership roles, they require different things of you as a leader. So I've become a bit more, I suppose, mindful of thinking, what does this role require of me that's different to the last one? And certainly my role here at the BHF, I've had a lot more frequent engagement with the board, and probably deeper engagement with the board than I've had in previous roles. And I've lent into that in a way that I've asked for their advice and counsel quite a lot of times, particularly if there's sort of challenging things. And their experience, they're all incredibly experienced leaders. We're very fortunate with our board. So their experience is hugely valuable to be a sounding board and to be a fresh pair of eyes, or to be another voice to help you, guide you and make good decisions.
I just want to add that I love the thought that when you talk about, it's very much about saying yes to things, being a mentor and being open to providing counsel to others. That sort of thought about paying it forward. Generosity and of your time, recognizing that others have done it for you before. And I love those notions of it. Really strong and really powerful as things to take away.
So at the moment, Richie and I are bidding each other up on using Gen AI.
Oh yes.
To sort of power up. Because it seems to be that's what's happening right now, isn't it? How do I personally power up? So let's get your take on Gen AI at two levels, actually. One is how you think it will enhance or conflict with creativity in terms of marketing, but also what if anything you're doing personally to power up using Gen AI.
So I have been using we're a Microsoft organisation, so I've been using Copilot, and I've been far more proactive about asking Copilot questions, asking Copilot to do stuff for me, like write me an agenda for this type of workshop, or write me, summaries. It's been great for summaries of documents, like particularly if you've got a long pre-read for something, give me a summary. Can you draft me a summary?
Is it writing your emails yet?
It's not writing my emails yet, no. I'm not sure I'd let it write my emails, because there's a thing about tone as well. Very true. And maybe it'll come in terms of, it will learn your tone and then it will respond in your tone. We've been using it for WACL as well, not Copilot. One of my WACL friends uses Otter AI. Oh, yes. And the first time that, because I was like, somebody's Otter's on the call, which was very exciting. You can send your, and because she wasn't on the call, she couldn't make it, but her Otter attended instead. And actually that worked really well in terms of because I'd forgotten hit record on the Copilot thing. So that works well in terms of meeting minutes, notes, actions, summary of the conversation. It's really good. Where else are we using it? We've got a few use cases which we're exploring around brand sign-off for things, for lots of creative assets, rather than the laborious process of a human having to check, is the font size right, is the logo in the right position, all of that stuff. We're exploring how we use it more for that sort of brand guardianship. We are exploring about how we use it for sort of content generation as well, particularly with email content, where you want to personalize, you want multiple variants of things and all of that stuff. And obviously within my remit, I've got the call center, the customer service center. So thinking about how we're using it there, can start to use it there for call handling, in terms of answering customer questions better and equipping agents better as well, actually helping upskill agents so they become more knowledgeable. There's a whole world of you. I mean, you can go. The use cases are endless, but you sort of got to start somewhere. You've got to start small, and you've got to start somewhere.
Well, what's interesting about your answer is that I think 6 months ago, if we'd asked you or anybody, they would sort of maybe mention one or two use cases. You've mentioned 6, 7, maybe 8. It shows how quickly it's permeated through.
Well, we spoke about, earlier on, perhaps even off camera, just about the difficulties that marketing and marketers face in a changing environment. And this is going to play a massive role in as you say, creating new opportunity, but also all of us need to upskill ourselves in the way to be able to deal with it. Claire, this has been a fascinating conversation, and the dots and where we've gone and how we've gone have been really quite engaging. But what I'm going to do is just pitch up the last question. And and maybe just give you the opportunity to maybe talk about a little bit of advice. I mean, you're coming up as the incoming president to WACL, and with all that experience, and just maybe a bit of advice as to how someone should navigate their careers as they move forward from your vantage point.
Big question to
Well, we have
end
to
on,
end on a
Richard.
big question, don't we?
A big question
Yeah.
to end on. A bit of advice for navigating your career. I mean, some of it we've touched on, a bit about team and, a bit about choosing roles, defining what you want and what you don't want in a role. And also when you choose a role, not just choosing the role, but thinking about who you're going to be working for and with is really important. We talked about that in terms of it will influence how successful you can be in that role. I think being open to, I've never been one to have a really strict sort of career path, and I remember I had a grad work for me at BT, and he was on the fast track exec program, and he, my first I think one-to-one with him was like, and he said, I want to be a CEO by the time I'm 40. I was like, wow, okay, it's great, that. I don't know. I don't know. So I've never had, I'm sorry to say, I've never had a particularly strict or defined career path. So being open to sort of opportunities and interesting opportunities that might arise that might be a bit left field. I think the BHF is quite a good example of that. We talked about, I wouldn't have been on a headhunter's list for this job, but I've learned a huge amount, and it's been an enjoyable few years in terms of being able to take my skills and experience and apply them in a very different sector and different way. So yeah, being open to opportunities that might not immediately seem obvious, and definitely the last one, we've talked about network a lot. Invest in building that network around you, people that will inspire you, support you, challenge you, offer you opportunities, help you learn. But yeah.
Well, Claire, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I'm just going to say one thing, actually, just as we close, which is there's been about 3 or 4 times in this interview where you gave yourself time to think rather than just sort of plowing into an answer, which often we don't always experience that. And I think maybe there's something about having the confidence to do that. But that's where some of your very finest answers were, particularly with the sunshine.
Yeah.
So I've really appreciated that. But more generally, it's been a fantastic
Thank you.
conversation to have with you. And thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me. Enjoyed it.